we are going to understand that the key stakeholder, apart from you and me, called the government. Government does a lot on development because the agenda of the government is development, right? They call themselves development government. And irrespective of the political party that comes to power, they have a mandate for rural electrification, for water, for sanitation, and the kind of work that they do is gigantic in its size, given the population and the infrastructure of the country. Now, what have they done to create a platform for people like you and me? How is government facilitating through the changes in laws and regulation? That is something which becomes very pertinent because the legal infrastructure of a nation sets a tone on how people behave. So, to have an enlightening discussion on the same, we have a upcoming panel discussion. Up next, we have latest amendment to the CSR law, and we have a very interesting combination of people, ladies and gentlemen, for this panel. First up, we have the head CSR of Bosch India Foundation and Bosch Limited, Miss Sakina Bakir. Okay, now I would like to tell something about her and her company. Bosch has initiated a short-term, job-oriented skill development program called Bridge in 2013 and have trained more than 65,000 plus candidates from 20 plus states by 800 plus centers and provided jobs in retail and service sector. And the role model center of this Bridge program is developed in SSRDP's Center of Excellence, Bangalore. Gurudev has given them a vision of starting 1,000 Bosch SSRDP Bridge centers across India. We are grateful to Sakina ji for all her support. Sakina ji, please come on stage. And the lovely girls that you see sitting behind Sakina ji this side have come all the way from Ayodhya. Thank you so much for making it here, girls. And they are a part of this program. Up next, we've got Mr. Rajesh Das, who's a group head CSR for Hindware. Let's give him a round of applause. Please come up on stage, Mr. Rajesh. Then we have Mr. Nirbhay Lumde, head CSR and Sustainability, CGI Asia Pacific. Let's give him a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Please come up on stage, Mr. Nirbhay. Up next, we've got Mr. Ganesh Reddy, Joint Secretary, UN Development Network, UN Global Compact Network, India. Give him a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Here's Mr. Ganesh Reddy for you. Next, we have Shilpa Jaiswal, Head CSR, JK Cement. Welcome once again, Shilpa. And to moderate this panel, we have a very eminent and an interesting personality. He's a founder and CEO of Ennoble Social Innovation Foundation. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Chirag Bhandari.
How many people amongst us are from corporates? Okay, so we have a few people from corporates. How many people amongst us are from the civil society? Okay, some people from civil society, okay. All right. All right, so, today we have all assembled here to celebrate 10 years of corporate social responsibility legislative being passed in the parliament, and CSR has been happening across the globe, like across various countries. It's been happening in different shapes and forms. India is the only country where it is a mandate. And over the last 10 years, like earlier, prior to this not being a mandate, there were a few corporates who were doing CSR out of their own intent. They would take out funds. They would understand their responsibility towards the society. They would do all the work. Uh, but a large majority was not doing it. But as soon as the mandate came in, a lot of corporates had to do it. Initially, with a lot of reluctance, they were unsure how to do it, what to do, all of that, just to kind of meet the law or abide by the law. But I think a lot of corporates, in the course of implementation, they realized the benefits, the SROI, the community goodwill that gets generated, the recognition that they get from the local government bodies, state bodies, and a lot of time the employee motivation that goes up. And a lot of good CSRs have actually realized that their brand value gets inflated as a consequence of good CSR. Also, I'm also a part of IIM Bangalore NSR Cell community. We have 100 plus startups there, out of which 70 startups are non-profits. And these are the top startups. There are many startups across India, like social startups, non-profit startups, which were mushrooming because of the fund availability. Just the sheer fact that fund is available. So, in today's day and age, a very, very small entrepreneur in a small location can actually think of an idea and reach out to a corporate. And because of the CSR fund availability, there's a very high chance that his idea might get funded. So, this decade of the CSR law coming in place and a lot of social innovation, I think this is the best time in India for being in the social space. I completely align with what the panel was discussing earlier, what Ketan said earlier. I think this is the best time to be in the social space. And the government intent has been this. The government intent has been to solve social problem, to get the CSR from the back room to the boardroom. That's why the board takes the decision. And today, we are here to discuss the amendments because the government is trying to amend and make the law more tight so that it delivers on the end objectives. But sometimes these amendments are confusing. So as a panel, we'll try and address some of these amendments. We'll try and discuss these amendments and throw more light on some of those ideas. So I will, without much ado, I would start with my first question, which is to you, Nirbhay. If you could share some perspective on the latest amendments that have happened, and how do you think these changes would impact the corporate social responsibility space in India?
Good afternoon. I guess this is the toughest session after lunch. Thanks, Chirag, for the setting of the context. I would disagree with you, Chirag. It's not about tightening of the law. I would say that the amendments need to be seen more from an accountability, transparency, maybe ensuring that the governance are more stronger. I would put that way. While those on this side, on the corporate side, would really say that when it is voluntary, why there are mandatory requirements. And I guess on the other side of the spectrum, which is NGOs, would feel why there are so many reporting standards. I would see it in three different contexts. One for sure is about bringing corporates much closer to social problem. While all of us agree in the corporate world saying that CSR is more of a license to operate. I think we need to move away from that thought process. It's time we need to move into a zone where we own up the society. We are part and parcel of the larger society and ecosystem. And we are making profits, certainly at the cost of the community. So therefore, it's all about how do we really look at some of the social spectrum and social challenges much more closer. So therefore, from an back-end operation to a boardrooms, for sure. So therefore, I would say that it's much more closer right now from a governance point of view. Second, it's all about the transparency. I guess about 10 years back, it was more about comply, maybe explain. Today is about penalties that we have come really. We have really trespassed as many paths over 10 years. So therefore, there is no complacency in terms of I would explain to the government and then get away with the compliance. So it's time that we need to sit across, have the board governance for sure and the compliance and much more closer oversight, be it in terms of the approvals or monitoring, but also about the filing your reports with the government on your external website. So therefore, I would say it's more about transparency that really brought in. The third biggest thing that really has brought in within the transparency about this has really benefited both sides for the NGOs as well as for the corporates. From an NGO point of view, I know a lot many of you really get disheartened when you don't hear from the corporate saying that, hey, we did submit a proposal, but we never heard of it. I think it's time that you always go back to the respective CSR or the company's website. You can always find out whom they are funding and where the money is going, the grantees are. And you can always align to the respective areas and work with them very closely. The last thing, what really made difference is about bringing back the impact assessment. So therefore, you cannot just say that I'll give away the money for donation. It's more about bringing, how do we really look at sustainability and impact much closer to the boardroom? And also equally making the not-for-profit sector or the NGOs accountable for not just pushing the money to the communities, but what dent that we are making over the year. And of course, the last one is about, this has really made flexible, I would put it that way. See, I can always put the money not just about year on year, but I can always look at multi-years, multiple projects, and then also opportunity for me to work with international organizations, collaborate with other organizations, other like-minded corporations. So therefore, not much flexibility, but it certainly has its own governance practices, which the CSR leads really ensure that the governance are in place.
All right. So, just to continue the discussion further, you mentioned about, certain, you mentioned about transparency, about impact assessment. Now, we need a very solid plan in place for a corporate to really achieve on all these parameters. So, Sakina, my next question is to you. I would want to understand, the law now requires an annual action plan on the CSR activities. Can you elaborate on this requirement and share your own insights so that we all understand it a little better? Additionally, the law also requires the CSR activities to be differentiated from the marketing activities. So if you could shed some light there as well.
Yeah, I think I'll take your second question first, and then I'll move to the annual action plan. It won't be wrong to say that when we started CSR before the law, somewhere it was CSR, social development was bordering marketing. Many of the establishments, especially corporates, use it as a marketing tool. And I don't think there's any denial in that fact that this is how it was happening and people wanted something out of it. I've heard times people saying, what is in it for me? And I think that's what happened 10 years back. But over the 10 years, we've evolved so much that we know there's a thin borderline between marketing and really doing a social engagement with the society on ground. So for us, we have evolved to the level where we think of impact first, and then what is in it for me. Obviously, the law doesn't say that you don't benefit out of it. You get indirect benefits. There's no denial in the fact that corporates do get indirect benefits out of it. How do they do it? That is why the law says, please look at your local community first before moving out to the other locations. That means the government wants us to create that connect with the local community where we operate from. So I totally endorse the fact that there has to be a very conscious decision and planning when you look at what falls under marketing, what falls under PR, and what is actually social engagement, which is anyways going to soften the brand image for the corporate, but eventually it's impacting people on ground. That has to be the main agenda for us to look at, the impact what it is going to create. So I don't see when we are planning for multi-year programs or an annual program, we should definitely keep that in mind, that it doesn't cross the border of marketing. It stays with your positive connect with the community where you're looking at their needs and solving it. When it looks at the annual action plan, please have a look at the annual action plan with a very positive mindset. Annual action plan format that has been provided by the government is same for every corporate in the country. It doesn't change for anyone. But if you compare annual action plans of one corporate from other, you will see the way it has been put in. It's very different for different corporates. So there's no uniformity in how I see my annual action plan for Bosch or some other corporate sees their annual action plan. But the ethos is that while we are looking at it, what is the information that you are giving out? That's exactly what the government wants. That's exactly what we should be looking at. Are we looking at the program in the entity, in its whole entity? Are we looking at where we are doing it, what it's going to impact, when it's going to start, when it's going to end? How do you monitor it? How do you make sure that you have the right kind of partners? assigned to these projects. This is a way of looking at it from the government's perspective, because they're not implementing it for you. Nor are the corporates doing all the 100% implementation. You have partners, you very diligently choose them, you make sure that they are there in every nook and corner of the country where you want to reach out. And I think I give full credit to NGO partners who are delivering the programs that we want to deliver on our behalf on ground. And it's our responsibility not only to acknowledge them in our annual action plan, but also build their capacities beyond just giving funds. So annual action plan in totality, if you look at it, it's a very, very beautiful data point for all of us. If you look at, and even you compare our own annual action plan of 10 years of Bosch, I'd say I'll come out with 10,000 data points out of it. So imagine the kind of organization in the country having the annual action plan, which is in the public domain, and the study material it provides for all of us. And we have evolved from annual action plan, which was not a formal setup because it came out in 21 January, the format, revised format. But before that, the annual action plan was not so meticulously drawn. Now we must acknowledge that from a CSR desk, the discussion has gone to the board level. You know, at that level when it is discussed, you can understand the kind of seriousness it's getting at par with the business. So I don't see a reason why we should take it lightly and how we build our annual action plan. Look at the annual action plan, draw meticulous plans for yourself and draft it accordingly. Obviously, it's a very brief plan that you give, but whatever you translate, whatever you put it in the annual action plan is in the public domain for people to see. So it's kind of helping vouch for that corporate who is investing a certain amount of fund on XYZ initiatives across the country or in multiple locations. So the seriousness to the plan is definitely something we all should look at it, and I think we should look at the notification that has come by the government or the amendment that has come up by the government on the annual action plan very seriously. And I'm sure we will have a lot more amendments coming in future as well, because the data that we put on public domain is what government assesses and how they come up with revised formats.
So, I mean, the importance of planning can never be overemphasized, especially for the development sector, I feel, because there are so many stakeholders and they have such diverse needs. And if you really plan well, you can actually deliver on these needs better. So I think government has this intent in mind. Inside this plan, the government has also, and Shilpa, this question is to you, they've capped the administrative overheads to a max of 5%. And, the amendment also talks about a clearer definition of what these overheads would be. And there's a lot of interpretation challenge between non-profits and corporates of how or what is administrative expense. So if you could throw some light from the corporate perspective and also, share your own personal insights on how do you see this cap.
Yeah, so administrative overhead is, I think, one of the most confused part of this act, and there is a lot of struggle between the corporates and the NGO that what fits into this criteria and what doesn't fit into this criteria, right? So to explain it, 5% of the fund goes for admin, 2% or 50 lakhs, whichever is higher, goes for impact, and rest 93% goes for implementation. So I will start what goes in implementation first. Obviously, the implementation cost, whatever goes for the program cost. Even the monitoring evaluation cost goes into this 93%. Even the designing of the project, which is need assessment, baseline, that also goes into this 93%. So many people are confused where to go, because I get many calls from even my friends who are in corporate space and even in the NGO partners, that where will we do the need assessment or the designing cost will go. So the designing cost will go into this 93%. Now this 5% cost, which is for administration, that is for the corporates. Now there is again the confusion that if corporate is paying for resource of NGOs, will it come under 5% or not? No, because that is the implementation cost. The partners are your implementing partner. They are implementing the project for you. So the cost which the partner is incurring, it's the implementation cost. And 5% cost is for admin cost, in which the CSR head, the people who are concerned with the admin of the CSR, the accounts, awards CSR are applying for, or research they are doing, or anything which they are doing on the administration will be part of this 5%. So when I make the budget, I do give a admin cost to the NGOs also, which is 5%, which is over and above the HR cost. Now there is again one more confusion. Suppose I have a team member and his salary, his 50% time is going towards monitoring of a project and 50% time is going towards admin. I can split the cost and put 50% of his salary in the implementation cost and 50% of salary in the admin cost. So I think it is very clearly defined over there, but I think the problem with the whole act is the interpretation. It is very much dependent on the people, how they interpret it and how they are implementing it. But overall, if you look at the act, it is designed and everything is interlinked. Everything is interlinked because if there is no, because government, because if you want to report on your spend, then obviously you need to spend on the admin of the financial expert. So therefore, everything is interlinked in the bill. So therefore, the confusion regarding this admin act, I think most of the NGOs do face that because their HR resources also cap into this 5%. No, it is not part of your NGO's admin cost is not part of CSR admin cost. It is implementation cost which has to be done. But for CSR, it is very clear 5% admin cost only include the administrative resources they are using to implement the CSR projects.
Thanks, Shilpa. So, and bringing in Ganesh perspective now, Ganesh, there has been changes about the eligibility criteria of the non-profits. And, there has been a lot of talk about which non-profits are eligible for funding and not for funding. So if you could share your perspective and your experiences on this.
Sure. You know, eligibility criteria is, something different. It is always the need-based, circumstantial, and it will depend on in which geographical area you are going to work it. Some agencies may be having all the legal status was whatever they need. Some of them be having the, subject matter specialization on which subject you are going to work on the particular project. And some of them may be having the good human resource structure, organization structure. Some may be having the good presence in the particular geographical area. And it will depend that on what project you are going to work. You are planning for community mobilization? Are you going to your project is going for the infrastructure creation? It depends upon, everything will depend upon that and which area you're going to work. It is left-wing extreme area. Yeah, it is the militant areas. Though here all the things will change. In militant areas or left-wing areas, you need the agency who is having the good presence and good network in that area. If you are implementing any infrastructure project, you need a technical agency who is having the expertise in that subject, that issues. And it will depend upon the project only. What kind of project you are going to implement, geographical area, size of the project, type of the project, everything will depend. You can't cap on that. You can't make it rational.
All right, so you're saying there's no one formula to really assess the eligibility criteria. It would depend on so many different parameters. So
yeah, it will depend. You may be having everything you have. You have the great experience, you're having the proven track record, but you have to implement in the border areas. The conflict is a conflict zone. Maybe you have to work in Jharkhand and some of the Naxal prone areas. How can you manage it? The local who is having the local network, local presence, better network to the different, the government as well, non-governments, it will help the project to get, accelerate. Otherwise, it will get stuck.
Sure. To Rajesh, to bring you in the conversation, the amendments also address the creation and treatment of capital assets acquired through the CSR fund. Now, how should companies approach these provisions and align with the new law and ensure a sustainable impact?
That's a tricky question. See, frankly speaking, corporates do avoid getting into all these capital assets and all. Once I was stuck, I tried to connect to CSR fraternity, CSR heads from different corporates. Unfortunately, nobody picked up my call on that day. And I consulted with the legal expert. Now, Sakina was asking me who is the legal expert in your team while you are dealing with some legal complications. Thing is that the law is very clear that the company cannot hold a capital assets. I mean, capital asset means anything that you create that is tangible in nature. I mean, you're creating a infrastructure, you have an MOU, mobile health unit, anything. You created this ashram, anything. You did anything under the CSR, you cannot hold it as a corporate. You have to give it back to the community. You have to hand it over. Now the catchy point is that, suppose the community, you have invested in an infrastructure and the land is in your name. So while handing over, you have to give the whole thing to the community or to the NGO through whom you are implementing all the things, including that land. Even if that land belongs to the corporate, it happens. It's a dicey situation. Suppose in a corporate land, uh, uh, any school is been created, and the ownership of the school belongs to local panchayat. So by default, the company has to hand over that land as well as this infrastructure to the panchayat itself. It has to be done within that financial year. There is no other excuses for that. That's for sure. When the laws was implemented and this amendment came in 2021, 90 days was given. I mean, initially 30 days was given, and if the board allowed, 90 days was given. Suppose before the law came, I was doing similar kind of activities, and after the law came, we had 30 days. After that, the 30 days was extended to 90 days. So we had the option to hand it over to the respective community, respective NGOs. If you have not done yet, then you could be facing a problem. That's something I just wanted to tell you. I hope I'm clear.
Yeah, sure. I was just.
And just one thing, my friends, those who are into, those who are from NGOs and all, if the corporate is asking you that they have spent the amount in the MHU or anything else and you have to give back because the contract was for 2 years and all. So my friend, you are not liable to give them to back. No, I mean, that's yours. That yours means at least they cannot claim it as per the law. Thank you.
All right.
It's
So
the part of the MOU.
All right, so Sakina, to bring you in this conversation again, uh, there's a lot of talk about transparency, and yes, this is connected to what I spoke to Rajesh about. So there's a lot of emphasis on how governance and transparency in CSR activities uh, is critical, and many companies are taking on different strategies to bring in this transparency. So my question to you is that what are you doing, or what are your specific, what is your specific understanding to bring in that transparency? Also, R&D investment is a critical space, and it is allowed in some areas and not allowed in some areas in CSR. So if you could throw some light there as well.
See, governance and transparency is not only related to CSR. Everything that we do, whether it is for profit, non-profit, for business, or otherwise, it requires certain level of governance and also certain level of transparency, which is important, especially in CSR. While the government has, provided a very clear view on transparency, how do you govern, who is going to be part of the board, you have to set up a CSR committee, and you have to make sure that they meet at least a certain time of numbers in a year. They have to sign off, the CFO is involved in some level in the whole CSR process. But it's very important for us to be transparent. Transparency, it involves and it adds to the conscience of an organization. So you can't always be talking about positive things in CSR. We know that it's not the case. In many cases, you face a lot of negative repercussions of your work on ground, because you're dependent on external stakeholders, you're dependent on government, you're dependent on locality, dependent on local population to implement that project on ground. So if you say that everything that we do, every money that we spend on CSR is 100% perfectly going to the cause that we wanted it for, I don't think that is true. I think in CSR we should understand that it can never be 100%. It can be less than 100% or it can be more than 100%. Sometimes when you say it's 100%, then it's only those service delivery programs that we do. It may not have happen for programs which are not service delivery linked or maybe advocacy and awareness linked. There it's very difficult for you to even showcase, be transparent in terms of the number of people that you are impacting. Government is very clear in terms of setting up the structure for CSR. They have said that we want to have a CSR committee which has to be at the board level, and there has to be a certain level of governance mechanism within an organization. Now that is not the limit the government has given. Government doesn't say you do only this. It says you devise your own systems, but this is bare minimum. So in Bosch, if I set Bosch as an example, we have a board CSR committee, we have a CSR department. In between these two, there is a board, there's a CSR steering committee. So there's a three-layer governance that has been set up, not because it was required or there was some issue, it was because the board may not be able to give that much of time in understanding the work that we want to do with the social sector or with the society. That is why the level was increased. It has two benefits. One benefit, obviously, increase in governance and transparency. Second benefit is the management gets involved in CSR. You know, there is always, for us at least, the CSR professionals, we struggle to make things understood at the business level. So for them, it's business, anything else doesn't matter. For us, our CSR is our business. So it is very difficult to make them understand. So having these levels and involving the leadership in CSR process, it helps ease the work of CSR. It even helps their vision in terms of what they are doing for the society and how business is impacting the society. So what the government says is bare minimum. What you add to is up to this corporate. That's up to corporate what they want to set up. They want to set up committees. They want to set up financial transaction committees. They want to set up certain committees which may look at thematic areas. It's totally up to the corporate how seriously they want to take up the CSR work on ground.
Got it. So we are short of time. I want to ask 2, 3 very quick questions. Rajesh, under 1 minute, if you could answer. Treatment of unspent CSR funds. I mean, there's a lot of talk about it. Also, how excess CSR funds have to be dealt with, and the impact of it on financial planning. Under 1 minute.
See, prior to this kind of, before going to lunch, there was a discussion that this is the right time. I mean, the month of February or March, generally NGOs do approach to corporates in a much flooded way. Simultaneously, our friends from consulting firms, they are pretty much confident that they get huge number of calls because corporates, they are not able to spend the amount, and they reach out to the consultancy firms that asking help us to spend the amount. So my point is that everybody must understand one thing, that spending is not about transferring money from corporate's account to the NGO account. It's basically the kind of activities that you are about already spent. I mean, under the activities, some sub-activities have been done and that amount has gone into that particular cause. Okay, that is point number 1. So mere transferring of the amount doesn't qualify the spending. That is point number 1. Talking about the law, what you asked me right now, I'm just finishing in 30 seconds. We have two kind of projects. One kind of project that is ongoing project. Suppose we have to do it for 2 years, 3 years. Generally, it's 3 + 1 years. Suppose I'm in year number 2 and some amount has been not yet spent, but that project is going on. I have to continue that project for the next year also, maybe next to next year. So at that point, I am allowed to create a specific bank account as per the law to transfer that money into that amount. Obviously, board will say the justification why the amount was not spent. And within the 30 days, I have to re-spend that amount into the same project. I have no other options. There is second conditions where there is no ongoing project. Suppose I have to do certain activities and that activities are to be completed within this particular financial year. So I have certain amount remaining. What I can do, either I have to give it to the Clean Ganga Fund or, PM Cares Fund and all. And it has to be done within 60 days or within 6 months. If I'm not able to do that, then I'm gone. Then I'll be receiving a notice.
Got, sure.
See, there are three things in this you have to understand. One is spent, one is excess, one is surplus, right? Spent, everyone knows. If there is spent, 100 rupees था 100 rupees खर्च कर दिया, spend हो गया. Excess, अगर आपने ज़्यादा खर्च किया है, you can claim it in the next year. Surplus is something which generally NGOs don't understand, and there's a lot of confusion about it, right? Surplus is the interest which you get on the funds which has been transferred to you. So suppose I have a yearly project and I have transferred the fund to you and you're getting interest out of that fund. That fund also needs to be spent in that particular year. If that is not spent, then comes the unspent. So there, that is also an unspent. Unspent, अगर 100 rupees था वो नहीं spent हुआ, that is also unspent, but surplus will also add to an unspent. So please, when you're making your UCs, do mention the surplus in that, and it has been utilized, and plan your project in such a manner that the surplus amount is also being used. Also, if you are generating fund out of this project, whatever projects you are implementing, if there is a fund which has been generated out of that project, that also needs to be spent in that particular year, or it's an ongoing project in that 3 years or 1 plus 3 years. So that is something which needs to be very clearly understood when you're managing the unspent.
Shilpa, very quickly, I would just continue with you. Very quickly, if you can also share, there's been an amendment on impact assessment also. Nirbhay mentioned about it very briefly when he was talking. So if you could just explain that also. I mean, there's a cap on the impact assessment fee also.
So in the morning session, someone was telling impact assessment. Impact is the most loosely used word. I would agree to it, because whenever impact is being used, people think it as audit. Impact is not audit. Impact in the whole act, impact is the only thing where it is talking about the beneficiaries and the things you have created. Rest is all about compliances. Whatever is happening in the act is all about compliances. Impact is the only place where the CSR law is talking about beneficiaries and what you have created. It is not audit. So I think why there is so much apprehension about impact assessment, because people consider it as an audit. But it is not audit. Yeah, there is a lot of debate when to measure the impact. Though I think impact, being in the development sector, we have studied theory of change and we understand that impact is long term and it has to happen after 3 years, right? But I understand why government has designed it in 1 year, because they want to understand what we have created and how we have created, especially for the projects which are over a CR. If the spend is over 1 CR, then the impact assessment is mandatory for the company to do, right? But the problem over here is whenever the impact assessment is talked about, people are scared that, oh, audit shuru ho gaya. No. See, the designing, therefore, in my previous, when I started, I said everything is connected, because why the act says that you have to do a project mode implementation. When you are doing a project mode implementation, that means you are making a proposal, you are designing the project, where you are designing the impact or whatever outcomes you are designing. Impact always doesn't have to be a fairy tale. Who told you that impact has to be fairy tale, or whatever you have done should be? Impact is, therefore, when you're designing the project, the risk and assumptions are there. You put the risk and assumption, and impact can say that. And in the impact, you can put a section where you can say that these are most of the outcomes, and impact which are more intense may be visible after 2-3 years. And if it's a corporate which has a multi-year project, or which is in that area, can do a impact assessment later on also. So coming back to the amendments and the law, it is mandatory for any project which is over a CR, which the spend is over a CR, they have to do an impact assessment of that project. And therefore, it is very important that the background document of that project should be there, because impact can only happen when there is an assessment done, where there is a baseline done, because impact usi ke against hoga. The problem is, because the baseline is not there, to showcase the impact becomes difficult. difficult, right? So I think I can go on and on this because this is an issue which is very close to my heart, and I think it is very important to assess what we are doing and how we are doing, and then to move to a certain direction. It is not it is mandatory, but many of the corporates do impact of, like we are doing impact of our whole location, plant location, because we want to understand what we have created, because it also helps us to design our way forward. So I think impact should be looked from that perspective.
Sure. Some reporting mechanisms, Nirbhay, to you.
Talking about this impact assessment, in one line, I'm just trying to add on what Silpa said. If it is not 10 crores, your annual budget is not 10 crores preceding 3 years, then you are not mandated to do impact assessment. That is for sure. If it is beyond 10 crores or 10 crores, and your one project is more than 1 crore, then only, as per the law, you are bound for impact assessment. Otherwise, I'm not liable to do that. Company can deny clearly. Thank you.
We are out of time. We just need to ask one last question to Nirbhay. Nirbhay, continuing what Shilpa shared. So there's been, in these amendments, there's a conversation around, updated reporting mechanisms, like the reporting mechanisms need to be more robust. And there's also a conversation around getting international organizations to come in and, bring in their expertise. So if you could share some light on these two.
I think that was an interesting amendment for sure. I think having local NGOs working, knowing this field, it was very interesting to have the international NGOs play their role. I think it's equally important to understand that when you have the international communities participating, it's a larger ecosystem that you are going to build together. Number two, it's also about bringing the expertise that they have been working with multinational and multi-sectorial reform that they have been making. So therefore, I think I would look at international organization more as an implementation partner. More than that, I think I would look at more like an impact partners, that they really can make lots of difference. Bringing in relevant practices that can be part and parcel of your program implementation, and also helps us to improve the progress, because today, as a corporate, you may not be comfortable to hearing a feedback from an NGO, but certainly, I guess, if it's an INGO, there's always an openness to accept their feedback and inputs to strengthen further.
And one last line from Ganesh. Ganesh, your views on the reporting mechanism. We'll just close this after this. Just one last line
not
from you.
spending CSR money. This is the March has come and you guys have not spent the CSR money. Exactly is happening in the panel. You enacted
Last
the
comment
role
from
play.
Ganesh we'll have, and then we'll wind this up.
The government will send notice.
So, I'm just looking at your views, because you bring in a very diverse perspective. You bring in a non-profit perspective. So just one last view on the reporting mechanisms. You see the change in reporting mechanisms. So how is your non-profit aligning to, to deliver all this? Because with your support is how corporates would deliver on their reporting, on their impact, etc. So your views, very, very quickly, he's looking at me from there.
Honestly speaking, some of the time, because of the force implement funding agency force, corporate force, sometimes they have to manipulate the report also. That by that I'll finish it. Sometimes happens ना, they need कि अरे भाई दे दो अभी क्या हुआ अभी हुआ नहीं जल्दी दो मतलब काम हुआ नहीं था हो गया अरे 2 दिन में तो 4-5 दिन में हो जाएगा. So that's why they are getting the things done on the reports, on the cards.
So, no, I will not take the questions, but I think it was a very insightful discussion. I'm sure, a lot of important points were touched. I'm really thankful to all the panelists for sharing a lot of details. And I think overall, the CSR space in India is thriving, like Ketan shared, and a lot of other people believe. I think this is the best time to be in India. Generally, in most spaces for business, and more so in the development space. So incredible work happening, and thank you again, all the panelists, for coming and sharing your views, and thank you, SMX, for having us here. Thank you.